Hello and welcome to All Hands on Tech, where today's leaders talk tomorrow's technology. I'm Daniel Blazer. In case you missed it, Pluralsight has made our entire content catalog free for the month of April. As part of this free April campaign, we've had a lot of people contact us for advice on growing their career in technology. In response, we hosted a live AMA with a panel of technologists who shared their stories and advice. This episode brings you the audio from this AMA featuring Shelley Benhoff, Dan Wahlin, Jeremy Morgan, and April Speight. I am here with a panel of technologists with a variety of backgrounds. And really today's AMA is all about growing your career in technology. Some of you may know this, but Pluralsight recently launched a free April campaign where we're basically making all of our course content available for the entire month of April for free. And with that, we have a lot of people that are looking at this content for the first time and asking the question, what does it take to get started in a career in technology? Or if you're started, how do you kind of take that next step? And so that's why we're here today, is to hopefully answer the questions that you have and hopefully kind of give you a little bit more certainty of what your next step could be. So joining me today, I have Shelley Benhoff, Dan Wahlin, Jeremy Morgan, and April Speight. And like I said, they have a diverse background in technology, but each of them have a great story to tell. And maybe to kick things off, could we maybe just do a quick introduction? We'll do Shelley, Dan, Jeremy, and then April.
Sure. Hi, I'm Shelley Benhoff. I have worked in tech for a little over 20 years. I mainly do web development. I'm currently a Sitecore MVP. And I am the lead developer on the Johns Hopkins Health website, which has been pretty popular lately.
I bet. My name's Dan Wahlin. I run a consulting company called Wahlin Consulting. So we do a lot of architecture consulting and training. So April, as we get to you, we'll have to chat more, but done a lot of that too. So we kind of specialize in mostly web related things, a lot of front end, back end, Docker, Kubernetes, Azure cloud type stuff.
And I'm Jeremy Morgan, and I'm a technical marketing manager here at Pluralsight. And before that, I was a software engineer, DevOps engineer, integration engineer, kind of a wide variety of activities in both the Windows and Linux worlds, and for about 20 years or so.
And hi, everyone. My name is April Speight. I'm a senior cloud advocate at Microsoft with the spatial computing technology team. I've been in tech for a little over 7 years, came from the fashion industry. Now I'm here. Before becoming a cloud advocate, I did project management as well as program management.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone, for your introductions. I think because of the nature of this AMA, the best question to kind of start off with is, how did you personally get started with your career in technology? And maybe, April, since you last answered the intro, why don't you start with your story, please?
Yes, no problem. So as I mentioned, I was working in fashion before I came into tech, and I was in fashion for about 6 years. And in the midst of that, I was also still in school. So as I was nearing graduation, I wanted to ensure that I had a career that would afford me the lifestyle that I wanted to live. And fortunately, while I was in school, I had did some project management related courses. And I thought I wanted to get my PMP, which is project management professional certification. And so I found an internship with Consumer Technology Association. And the internship was for it was like an IT project management intern. And that's really where it started. When I went to do the interview, I was very clear about my own career goals and what I wanted. And I made it known that even though this is an internship, I would like to see this become something permanent. So I was fortunate to work with my manager to actually develop what my internship looked like that would transition me from intern to full-time employee. And I would say I started that in May of 2013. By August, I had an offer for a full-time position there. And I would say being very upfront about what I wanted for myself at the interview stage definitely played a big role. Since then, I've been fortunate to work alongside some very great people that was able to help either mentor me or help me get to where I am today. Now I do work in developer relations, and I started just creating content, and that led to opportunity of where I'm at today, but I can touch upon that a bit later.
Jeremy, could you tell a little bit about, how you got started?
Sure. So I actually did have a defining moment that brought me into software. So I always knew that I wanted to be into tech, and I worked at an ISP doing like systems administration. And then I went to school for network administration and networking. And I thought for certain that once I got out of school, I was going to be a network engineer, and I was going to work with routers and switches. And so I got a job at Hollywood Video, so the video rental store from way back when, and in their corporate office. And one of the things that they would do is they would have people go into the call center and do customer service for a month before they started the job. So I got hired as an engineer, as an IT engineer, and they said, well, you've got to go answer the phones because we want everybody to know the voice of the customer, which I still think is like a really cool thing that they did. So I was there in the call center, manning phones, answering questions about late rentals, things like that, actually having a lot of fun with it. But I had a book on my desk that was a PHP book because I wanted to learn PHP for some scripting things. And the director of software engineering walked by my desk at that time, and he's like, hey, I noticed you've got a book there on PHP. Like, how do you know PHP? And I'm like, well, you can see where I'm at in the book, And he's like, well, if I gave you a week or two to put something together, would you want to interview for a position on my team? And I said, sure. So they had me write this book checkout program as if it were a library with PHP and MySQL. And I put it together, and it was absolutely terrible. I would love to see that code now, but it got me the job. And I ended up going into the software department instead of the IT and engineering. And then I stuck with software for years and years after that. So there was definitely like one defining moment where my path just completely switched and stayed in that direction for ages.
Dan, what is your story?
Yeah. So in school, I did nothing with computer science. I was on the med school track. And in between applying to med school, so I graduated. In between applying, because I took some summer class and stuff, I was a little ahead, and I applied for a job because I wanted to move back to Arizona. And I was, I guess, so excited for the job, and I knew nothing about it, by the way. They knew that, and I told them that. Well, I shouldn't say that. I knew HTML and CSS, and that's about it. But it was a server-side programming job, and this was kind of an ancient technology, by the way. It was classic ASP. So long story short, they literally hired me because they said I was so excited that they were convinced that I would do well. And so I kind of owe a lady, Danica was her name, kind of owe her, I guess. I need to take her out to lunch or something. But anyway, then from there, got into writing a lot, blogging, and started my own company from there. So it's worked out awesome.
And Shelley, tell us a little bit about how you got into tech.
Yeah. So as Jeremy said, I too had a defining moment. I was in high school, and our PC was on the fritz, and so I cracked it open and I added RAM. And my dad just looked at me and he was like, this is what you should do with your life. So I did. In college, I studied computer science. After I graduated, my first, professional jobs were actually in help desk, but I found ways to code. So I gradually moved over to jobs where I was actually programming instead. I started out doing Microsoft Office automation, doing VBA, that graduated into, I did a couple projects where I transferred programs that were previously written in either Excel or Access to web applications. So I started off writing and don't kill me, VB.net. But then, of course, the world moved to C#. So I learned that. I started working with Sitecore 10 years ago, I guess, and I have done nothing but Sitecore ever since.
Thank you, everyone, for kind of giving your backgrounds and how you got started in technology. This is an open-ended question, so we can answer that however we want. But a very common one that we often see as on Pluralsight social media channels, and I think a lot of you probably see, is you want to become a developer. How do you go from wanting to be a developer to getting the first job? Like, what are the pieces that you feel like are required? Does anyone want to jump in and start answering that question?
Yeah.
Great answer. Okay. Yeah. Shelley.
Yeah. So, what I did was that, the problem with getting your first job as a developer is that you need experience. But in order to get, it's like a cycle. So what I did was personal projects. I created a website of my portfolio overall. I think it was hosted on like GoDaddy or something like that for like $1 a month or something. Really, really cheap and really easy. And it also just helps you to stand out.
How do you typically answer that? I'm sure a lot of you get that question too, right? Going from I want to work in this field to that first job. What components do you think are essential? Maybe April, do you want to take the next whack at this question?
Yeah. So outside of having personal projects, which I often suggest people consider doing, for me, since I work more in the advocacy realm, if you will, creating content was really, really huge for me, but also networking and getting to know people that work for different companies you might be interested in, or just getting to just genuinely know people that also work in tech, because you never really know who may know who. And even if someone doesn't work at, let's say, whatever your dream company is, it doesn't mean that they don't know someone that's looking to hire someone who already works for that company. So for me personally, I was doing, like I said, project management for so long, but now I'm working more on the developer side. And networking definitely helped me find my way to Microsoft. That was pretty big. And then when it came to now working as a cloud advocate, creating content before being onboarded as an advocate was really, really big. And so if you're the type of person that wants to work in tech and you want to create content specifically in tech, don't wait to get hired to create content. Do it before you're hired. Already have different channels where your content exists. I know for me personally, I have my own personal website. And then on that website, I happen to also have tutorials that are written out. I also have YouTube videos as well. I have my GitHub repo where you can actually go find the code for the different tutorials. And what's great is that when things are already online and they exist in public spaces, it's easier for people to go and find it. So I know when I was even interviewing for my roles, those projects that I had created were brought up before I even had a chance to even talk about them, because the people that were interviewing me, they had already seen the work that I was doing, simply because I already had it on the internet. It existed there, and people happen to have known about it. So, from a role where creating content is what you do, which is what I do now for my job, don't wait to get hired to create content. Just do it now, have it exist, and then get better at it, because you'll start creating. For me, my initial stuff that I created, it was okay, but then continue to refine those skills, continue to find new ways to teach, continue to find new ways to edit videos and such, and just get better and better and better at it, and don't just settle. But create content if you're more along the lines of someone that wants to do that. Create it before you're hired.
Anything else, Dan or Jeremy, do you want to add with the question of going from I want to the first job?
Yeah, actually. So when I talk to people that ask me that, I get that question a lot also. And there's two different paths they can take. And basically I say, okay, do you want to be a developer at your company and try to get into it, and then I will tell them, start bugging them, start putting your code on GitHub and show them solutions for problems that they have. Like show that that you have the ability to solve those problems and just keep bugging and pestering people. If you work at a company that has no developers or no IT infrastructure or anything like that, then the best way is, as others have said here, start a blog, start a GitHub. As a hiring manager, for about 10 years or so, I hired software developers, and that was one of the first things I would look for every single time was a GitHub, a blog. And it wasn't so much that I was looking to see how good they were. I was just seeing if they're putting things out there and if they're working on things every day and showing that kind of passion. Like if you've got a GitHub that's full of terrible code, it's far better than nothing at all to where we have to guess. So that's generally what I tell people. If you're trying to move within your company, start pestering them, start solving problems for them, whether they ask for it or not. And then if you're trying to move to another company, just start building up a GitHub, start building silly projects that have no use to anybody but you, but just put things out there and write articles and tweet about it and things like that.
To chime in real quick, Daniel, on that, first off, what April said is so good because I get the question so many times of, hey, do you think I should start a blog? Yeah, there's no reason not to start a blog. Even if you're very solid in your job right now and you're not looking to go anywhere, then a blog, a GitHub repo, like Jeremy just said, all those things, I think number one, they show a passion for it. And I think it's easy to find developers. It's not easy to necessarily find, though, the passionate developers who truly are into what they want. And that's the kind of developers I want with my company, for example. So if whether it's we just had another panel thing I did with another group a couple of weeks ago. But one of the big things is, a lot of people also ask, should I start doing videos? Yeah. I mean, my gosh, you can use Livestream is just next to free if you use like OBS or put stuff up on YouTube. And you might go, oh, but people are going to, hate on me or whatever. Yeah, you know what? Those are the people you don't care about. Don't worry about those people because they're probably miserable and you should just go for it. So anyway.
You can turn off the comments on your entire channel if you want, which is what I did.
I think that's great advice. Always a great way, at least to start. So it's not just like another barrier, right? Is just, let's not worry about that right now, maybe down the road. Awesome. So I think, there's a lot of talk about coding boot camps. And that's kind of one side of things. And I think a lot of people are considering those. On the other side, you have a more formal college perspective. You also have some options like a Pluralsight or some of the other resources that exist where it's a lot more self-paced, self-taught. How does someone weigh all of those options? And what do you think are the most valuable of those, or does it depend?
So I'm going to start with your very last question you asked was, how do you determine which route you take? And what I like to tell people is go in a direction that's best for you to learn, because we all learn in different manners. Some of us need to be in more structured environments, like a classroom, for example, and that's fine. Some of us like to self-learn through different platforms, and that's completely fine too. Some like to just read books. Do what's best for your approach to learning. And for me personally, I stuck with just different learning platforms. I didn't go to a boot camp. I did not study anything related to programming when I was in college. And so I mean, if you can name a coding platform, I've probably tried it out. And that's what I did. But to take it a step further, because I do like things to be a bit more structured, I actually started to put together what I call a curriculum. Whereas I would spend the weekend going from platform to platform to platform, finding who had courses on X, and then from there putting together a schedule of when I would spend time actually going through going through the content for each different platform. And then from there, also kind of branching out and seeing, well, what other related topics should I also look into as well? And so that's what I did. Now, starting out, I preferred to stick with the platforms that were free. Primarily being that I wasn't sure if I was ready to spend money on something if I didn't really like it. But once I realized that I really liked what I was learning, which for me at the time was Python, I then started transitioning to the paid platforms. And so from there, you really have to think about if you're paying for something, it's an investment, especially if this is something that you're turning, whether it's into a career, if you're looking to work for a company or for your own company, when you're starting to evaluate the cost of the different courses on different platforms, a course might be, let's say, $200. But in the long run, you'll probably salary-wise will make way more than $200. So for me, I would consider that to be a really good investment because it's, my one paycheck is going to pay off that. So for me, I would say because I am more of a solo learner, I like to just only focus on me, no one else in the classroom. Platform learning was the easiest for me personally, but for others, that changes for everybody.
I think that's a great answer. It's such an individualized question, I guess, is, kind of a summation of what you're saying. Anyone else kind of want to weigh in on that debate in classroom, online, boot camp?
I would also suggest that you look at what types of jobs you want and what classes are available either through, college or anything else. One of the things with tech is that most of your jobs will be a little different, process wise and technologies, the approach to architecture, especially, is different at certain jobs, but just put together your own curriculum, maybe of like a blend of everything to learn just the skills that you need for that job.
So the advice that I've given a lot of people is, to choose the path that works for you, like April said, and whether that's going through formal college or boot camps. At the end of the day, you're paid to solve problems. And I used to say this as a manager all the time. You're not paid to write code. You're paid to solve problems. Whatever enables you to be a good problem solver, using code as tools is what's going to be the most important. And I've worked in places where I've had someone that has a PhD next to me, and then somebody without, someone with a high school diploma, and we're all working together to solve a problem. And we all bring different perspectives and different, because of that path, somebody that's gone through the entire educational system is going to have one way to approach it, and it might be the right way. Somebody that has scrapped their way up through another industry and taught themselves how to code is going to have another approach that might work. And you're always going to have different problems with different approaches and different solutions. So everybody has something that they can bring to the table, no matter what their path is. So that's generally what I've told people over the years.
Yeah, I think that's great. And that actually leads us into one question that I think, Jeremy, you were talking about this AMA beforehand, and someone on Dev2 messaged you and they asked the question, why do big companies generally prefer to hire people who have a degree from a big, well-known college? Are there, maybe it almost seems like they're just looking only at the name, right, rather than the actual skills of the individual. I don't know if we can answer why, but maybe what are some tips about how to get past that, or how to kind of put yourself on level footing when maybe you don't have that big college name on your resume?
Well, and for me, and I think almost all of us on here, I didn't have a CS background anyway. So hiring me, because I did get a degree, but it was literally a biochem type degree and economics. And so, yeah, I did have a lot of math, but that's about it. So it really comes down. I like how you said that, Jeremy. It's, it's problem solving. And one of the things I think, whether you're looking to get into a job or you already have a good job and maybe you want to move up, is you have to learn to differentiate yourself. I'll give you a couple examples. A lot of people can learn a language and write web apps, for example, or mobile apps. That's something that there's a million courses out there and things like that. Not everybody, though, has the ability to see the big picture and know how to put different pieces together. So, for example, you could build a web app, but of course, there's a lot more to that. There's the architecture, there's the deployment, there's the automation. Jeremy, I know you'd be the expert in this area of that deployment. There's cloud, and there's all these different kind of big picture pieces that could kind of differentiate and, I would say, explain to others in a more approachable way, especially a visual way. You're going to kind of rise to the top there, even if it's in a meeting at work. Because I guarantee if I'm the manager in the meeting at work and we're talking about, I don't know, we need to use a queuing service or something, and you start going into the basics of that, I'm going to take notice. It's like, oh, I just thought you knew, JavaScript or C#. So the more you can kind of step off the beaten path and differentiate is going to be that much better for your career.
I had one tiny thing to add as well to all that Dan said. One other very significant thing, and I can definitely say I went through this during my interviews with Microsoft, but working with others is also something that you should consider also doing as well. Because for me, for my role when I was a program manager, there were a lot of questions around conflict resolution and working with teams. And so keep in mind that once you do join, a company, or even if you own your own company, eventually you'll start working with others. And so it's very important to know what that's like to work with others beyond just yourself, because you will be depending on someone for different deliverables of whatever it is that you're creating. And also keeping in mind that not everyone that you're going to work with will be your best friend. You will have many different personalities as well that you'll work with. And so be prepared in different instances in your interviews to talk about your experience working with someone that or just working with someone that you may not have gotten along with, and what was it that you did in that moment, because those things do matter. You could be the smartest person in the room, and that's great, but if you can't work with others, that's a bigger problem, and it will slow things down. So soft skills definitely play they play a big role as well. And if you're wondering, well, how do I work with others if I haven't worked for a company yet? You can contribute to different open source projects, for example. You and your friends can get together and work on a project. And then once you have that portfolio site that we were talking about earlier, you can actually just, you can document who did what on which project. And then when you interview, you can speak to those different things as well. But being able to work with others is a really, really important thing that you want to make sure that you're able to speak to as well.
That's so great. And that actually leads perfectly. I had a question that I wanted to ask. What other soft skills do you think are important? You just touched on, working with others and how no matter, we're going to all be working with different types of personalities and we have to figure out how to do that. Are there any other soft skills that anyone here has found to be really important in establishing and growing that career in technology?
I would say communication. In tech, there are a lot of different types of people. You might know of a stereotype of like a person with a pocket protector in a room with no windows and it's just dark, it's just them and all of that. I've definitely worked with those types of people. And it works as long as you can communicate. And
I would like to add, there was a book that was written in 1939 that I read every few years. It's How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. And that has helped me a lot through my career. And I've given that book to people and they're kind of surprised. And I'm like, no, just read this will help you. And a lot of what that book covers is working with people, finding out their motivations and why they do what they do, and just seeking to understand their context and perspective. It's amazing that it was written almost 100 years ago and it still applies today. But definitely being able to understand someone else's perspective and not just assume, well, they're just a jerk because they're a jerk and they like being a jerk. Maybe there's something in the background that's causing them to behave this certain way. And there's things that you can do. And that goes back to problem solving again, just a very non-technical problem solving.
One more that I know everybody here is involved with too is the more you're able to present your ideas to a meeting, or then maybe you start presenting at, meetups or eventually conferences. I'm not going to say I hire people because they're good speakers necessarily, right? That doesn't equate directly to being a good developer or DevOps or whatever you're doing. However, it will absolutely help you in your career, because as a conflict, for instance, comes up, which we've been talking about, which will happen, you can count on it. You're going to hopefully have the ability to, number one, do what Jeremy just said. I like that, Jeremy, that book is awesome, by the way. An oldie but goodie. I mean, it's definitely something everybody should read. I think, though, that the ability to clearly express what you're thinking, your ideas, you may not win the argument or win the architecture discussion, whatever it may be. That's okay. But if you could clearly articulate what it is you'd like to say about it, it's going to go a long ways towards, moving up eventually, or even getting a job during that interview.
Along those lines, for a lot of technical people, we are kind of shy and introverted. So even presenting to a team might be daunting for us, right? But I suggest go outside your comfort zone. If I had never gone outside my comfort zone, I wouldn't be a Pluralsight author. I wouldn't be a Sitecore MVP. I wouldn't be asked to speak at conferences. It's just life at times asks you to show up, and you can either do it or pass. I don't suggest passing ever.
I love that. There's so many great tips from everyone. I want to third the recommendation of How to Win Friends and Influence People. Also, that book honestly changed my life. And don't let kind of the schmaltzy title put you off. I've always felt like the title was not in service of the quality of the book. So anyway, go look at the audio version or whatnot after this broadcast. We've got a couple of, these are a little bit more specific questions that came in through Facebook. So maybe, just a quick answer for anyone that feels like they are positioned to answer them well. We had one question: what are possible thoughts of kind of next steps if you're a junior .NET backend developer and you want to progress? What are some thoughts on how to progress from that junior .NET backend developer role?
I'll take that if you don't mind, because I literally did that. It's a lot about knowing your craft a little bit more, knowing how to quickly resolve problems, not having to search, the internet for everything. But then also leadership, a person who moves up into a, more middle or senior role, I think is in a position to mentor juniors. So if you show that you have that skill, then it'll go a long way for you.
I don't know who wants to answer this one. I am into Sitecore. Anyone know Sitecore? They're asking if they should select Sitecore Plus .NET career over Azure Plus .NET.
Well, I mean, I'm a little biased because if you do Sitecore, then you'll probably take my training on Pluralsight. So I would say that. But I would just suggest that you look at what type of jobs you want and the companies. Would you be comfortable working at a Sitecore partner or a customer, small team, large team, all of that kind of stuff? I would say personally, for me, my career in Sitecore has been very, very rewarding. So,
anyone else want to weigh in?
I will say that I know little to nothing about Sitecore. However, here in the Portland area, Sitecore developers are very sought after, and I get a lot of emails for it. And I've been asked about it a lot of times from fellow people that I talk to kind of in a local .NET community. They're like, do you know any Sitecore developers? If you do, please let me know. So there is a very high demand for that particular skill.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's pretty niche too. So when you have the demand and it's also niche, right now it's a developer's market in Sitecore world.
We got a question from Rebecca on YouTube. They're wondering, coming into tech from another field, how do you kind of adapt your thought process and communication? So maybe you're adapting it to those who are already in the field, like what, and we've kind of talked about with the soft skills, but kind of the adaptation of communication and thought process moving from another area. Anyone want to jump on that one?
I can handle that one.
Great.
So, bit of background for context to set my answer. I went from being a menswear stylist and a visual merchandiser to now managing projects in an IT department. That was where my first entry was into tech. And so, believe it or not, even though the two industries are very different, those skills that you have in one industry more likely in some sense will carry over to the other. And that goes for ways that you approach communicating with others as well. So I would say for me, for example, one thing that was really big when I was working in fashion, for example, was product knowledge and really knowing and understanding whatever it is you're selling. And that might be knowing who the designer was, where they designed it, what the process was, how many colors it came in, the price, so on and so forth. When you come into tech, for example, for me, I was working with rolling out software. And so it was, in a sense, the same thing. I had to know about all the different features of the software, how to do X, Y, Z in the software, how to use the software, how to go about encouraging others to also adapt to using said software. So it was the same thing in a sense, but one really key defining thing was the terminology and really understanding the right terminology to use to communicate with others. So that way you are more or less on that same playing field. And starting out, you might not know what every single word is. To this day, I've been in tech for 7 years, and every so often someone mentions something on Twitter where I don't even know what they're talking about. And that's just because that there's so many different words to know. But once you do start with a certain career in tech, try to ramp up on terminology, try to get to know what all these different terms are. Lie to you not, I still Google what certain words are, and you can just Google what are tech words, and there will be definitions of what these words mean. Start trying to incorporate those into your conversations. And one thing that really helped me, I would say, was when I started working as a project manager, I worked closely with developers. And I literally went to one of our directors and I told him that I wanted to be able to speak your language. So that way, when I am communicating with you all, I can use the terms that you're using. And he was actually happy to hear that of me. And we worked together to go over the different projects that I was rolling out. And if I described something in a certain way, in a non-technical way, he would in turn explain to me how to actually explain it using the language that his team uses. And then from there, we just kept building on that to the point where I was actually able to sit in meetings, communicate in a way that was meaningful for their team, which was super helpful. And I would say in the long run, that's really what helped me, even with my career, with where I'm at now, because now I help teach beginners different tech things. So I'm able to speak both that technical language and that non-technical language. And so, yeah, just learning the terminology. And one other thing, I'll let someone else answer, but understanding that everyone communicates in different ways. And so that's one thing I've really had to learn. And it's not always about how April wants to communicate with everyone. It's really adapting to the way different teams communicate. So for example, when I was a PM with Microsoft prior to my prior role, I worked with engineering, I worked with design, I worked with our stakeholders, and recognizing that what works for one team might not work for another. And rather than me force my ways on these teams, I just adapted because we just needed to get the projects rolling and get things going. And so adapting to how other teams communicate, whether that's always through email or hopping only on video calls, adapting is also something that I would say I've had to learn over time. And it's really had a positive payoff, I would say.
We just got another question that I think is a really good one from Alex on YouTube. They're interested in getting into open source, and they say, I always hear how it's important to join open source projects as a junior developer looking for a first job, but I just feel so lost. Any advice?
Let me jump on that one real quick because I have a ton of projects. So first off, who asked that? Alex? So Alex, if you're still listening, hopefully you are. When I first got started, I felt the same way back in the day. In fact, I had a buddy I worked with, and this is before open source really became popular. I mean, I'm only about 28, folks, just so you know, but no, I wish. But it was many years ago, and he kept touting open source. And I was like, whatever. And then, of course, it became very popular. So he was right. My point is, though, the number one thing you can do is learn, for instance, how to navigate around GitHub. That's going to be super helpful. Learn the real basics. And there's some nice tutorials out there. You don't have to memorize this. There's courses on it. There's blogs. Learn how to do what's called a pull request. And I'll give you an example of why I'm pretty passionate about this. So I have a couple libraries out there. One of them is more of a front end library for Angular, React, Vue, that type of thing, called Observable Store. And honestly, I would say the last, like if I had to pick the coolest ideas that are now in it, they didn't actually come from me. They came from other people who had an idea. They went into the issues and they actually said, would you be interested in this? Which you don't have to do, by the way. And then I was, and they did what's called a pull request. And even if you just fix a typo in documentation, like that's a great way to start. Go find one little minor thing that needs tweaked. Learn how to do this pull request, which is super easy, by the way. I mean, you could do it in like 30 seconds, less. And submit your first one, and then you're going to go, oh, this isn't so bad. And anyway, that's where I would start.
Anyone else want to weigh in on the open source question? Okay. We have another question from YouTube from Shashank, who they say they've been developing mobile and web apps for several years, but now they're interested in kind of going down the machine learning path. But the problem they're running into is getting a relevant internship or kind of starting down that path because they're all looking for more machine learning relevant stuff. Any advice for kind of, changing that course a little bit?
My advice would be to find a problem or a need that they have and create a project around it with machine learning. So there's a lot of courses out there, of course, and a lot of blog posts, things like that to kind of learn. You can download packages and hit services. Even like with Azure, there's a certain free amount of usage you can do with these and just create some kind of project. Like recently when I was talking with a podcast guest, he was talking about sorting his family photos and ways to sort them and decided to use computer vision for that because it's like 10,000 photos. Obviously he knows, what his children look like and can put them in folders, but instead decided to use machine learning to do that sorting to solve that problem. So that would be my suggestion, is to find a kind of a cool project and just start working on it. No matter how clunky and weird or whatever it might be, just keep working on it. And then when you go to apply at those internships or at those junior jobs, you can say, well, here's my pet project that I've been working on the past few months and, take a look at it. And I think that's a good way to break into that right now. That's another high demand niche industry for sure. So I think hiring managers would be very interested in a personal project.
One other thing to add on to that is also, as you are working on your personal projects and getting more ramped up with machine learning or just AI in general, definitely consider the ethical implications behind it as well, because that's another big area that more and more companies now are, they, I guess, have been paying attention to, but as of late as well. That's a really big component. It's just the ethics behind it. So if you could speak to that too, in whatever project you're creating, that's going to be helpful when it is time for you to actually share with someone about your process behind what you're creating and why you created it a certain way as well.
I have another question on YouTube. How do you make the transition from learning a language and getting started to actually making something fun?
Ooh, can I do that one?
Please do, yeah.
Yes. So I like to only make fun projects, I would say, when it comes to programming. And it really comes down to just thinking like, if I could make this one like crazy, silly thing, what would it be? And then from there, I like to just bring in every single, like for me, it was Python. I like to bring in every single like facet of Python, if you will, into that project. And sometimes starting with a tutorial that's done something similar is really helpful, because then you can add on to it. You can change it and make it your own. But if you're starting from something that's completely scratch, that's fine. Starting from scratch, that's completely fine too. And being comfortable with the fact that you might need to actually do a little bit more deep dives on Google to figure out how to do something. And like for me, even though I'm writing my book now for on Python, as I'm like creating projects for the book, I still find myself having to Google like how to do certain things here and there. Completely normal to do that. But just find something that you're interested in. Like even right now, I'm working on, it's called like a LeBot James bot. And it's like a bot that gives you LeBron James facts. So just like finding like little quirks here and there, that'll introduce, for that particular project, it introduces to like using APIs, for example, learning more about conversational design with bots, deploying to different things like Echo Dots. And that's what I plan to use. But in any case, just find something silly that you like and then just go on a deep dive from there of how to actually create it.
We have a question from Michael on YouTube. I am a cybersecurity enthusiast, but I don't know exactly what to major in. Any help on that?
I could take that one. I would say as a part of cybersecurity, of course, there's a whole set of skills around cybersecurity that are very specific to it, but you still need a base knowledge of how systems work, how to administer servers, things like that. In fact, the more you know about things like system administration, the better you'll be at cybersecurity, because it will become intuitive at that point. When you're thinking about ways that people are going to try to get into your servers, it's a lot more intuitive when you know the servers. So I would say the major could be a computer science or something somewhat to like with my degree was more focused towards networking and running things. And so I think some kind of major in infrastructure, administration, engineering would be very helpful for cybersecurity in particular.
We've got a Facebook question that basically Omkar is seeing a lot more openings for full stack developers or mean stack developers. And they're just trying to figure out, do I want to be one of these more all-rounder kind of developers or more of a specialist? Does anyone want to weigh in and kind of trying to weigh that decision?
Sure, I can take that one. In a previous life, I did all the stacks. I would say that is a good avenue to pursue, but keep in mind that when you're a full stack developer, a lot of times if there's like an emergency, it kind of gets heaped on you because you know all. So I would suggest being a person who can stay calm during an emergency is a key. That is not me. I ended up specializing because it just seemed right at the time. But I will say when you are highly specialized in something that is niche, the salaries tend to be a little bit higher. So that's always good.
To add to that real quick, somebody earlier asked about how do you move from kind of junior up. So I'm going to argue that knowing the full stack is going to help you there. So for example, if you'd like to be maybe a team lead or architect or something like that, and you want to move up to that level, you are going to have to know these different pieces. And I totally agree, Shelley, with your comment on you got to stay calm though. Quick story on that. We once had, it was a bad deployment issue. So we should have automated better, Jeremy, apparently. But anyway, something went wrong. And I literally had the CIO at my desk, and he stood there the whole time until I resolved it. Now, luckily, we got along great because I reported to him. But I was just like, and my heart's racing. But, we got it done. We stayed calm. So I think the more you do know about the different pieces, the more value you can offer. But I think you also, as Shelley said, need to be willing to kind of accept that, you might become the go-to. But that can also be a good thing because you might move up from there. So
full stack is always discussed with developers. One of the things that I've noticed over the years, and I include myself in this, there are no full stack developers who are 100% great at every single part of the stack. You're going to be a little bit better at back end or a little bit better at front end or a little bit better at this, no matter what you do. So don't let that hold you back or kind of be intimidating. Don't think, well, if I don't know all of these things perfectly well, then I'm never going to be able to be a full stack developer, because I just don't think it's possible for somebody to master every aspect of it. And so don't let that hold you back or intimidate you from moving forward.
Can I add one tiny little thing to that?
Absolutely, yeah.
And this goes for really any role in tech. And I'm glad that Jeremy pointed out with just this full stack conversation. With really anything, you don't have to be an expert at everything that involves your job when you're hired, because you're still going to be learning once you start your job. Literally, my current role, I spent 3 months learning, and that was all I did. So as you are onboarding in new roles, just know that you don't have to know everything. You'll still keep learning once you start that position. And that's really with any job in tech, I would say.
I think we've hit the point we have maybe time for each person to do a kind of a 30-second takeaway, sign off. You can plug something, whatever you want to do. But let's do that right now. Dan, do you want to start?
Sure. First off, if you're listening and you were somebody who was unfortunately laid off or furloughed or something like that, I can sympathize. I, during my career, had that happen twice, actually, during the tech bubble and during the 2008 downturn. So know that for me, it was the best thing that ever happened, actually, because it motivated me to go into different areas that I wouldn't have, because I had to step outside my comfort zone. So I know it's a bummer, but don't let it get you down. For those that are not in that role and you have a job now, congratulations. That's a good thing, especially right now. My recommendations are learn. Be okay with admitting what you know and don't know. I always ask an interview question when we hire that you literally can't answer. And what I want to hear is the words, I don't know. And then I'll follow up with, well, what would you do since you don't know? And then I let them know, hey, it's good. I'm glad you said that, because I can't work with people that are know-it-alls. It's not the type of people we want to work with here. And then to wrap up, get involved online. Start, whether it's YouTube videos or speaking just online or speaking at meetups. Start a blog if you don't have one. There's all these different things you can do, and then be really creative with exploring technologies. I think, April, you've touched on a whole bunch you've done there. And you don't know what you don't know what you don't know. You don't know what you like and what you don't like until you do it.
Jeremy, you want to do a final takeaway?
My final takeaway would be very much the same as what Dan just said. Keep learning. Don't let obstacles get in your path. Everyone is welcome in tech. I worked with people who went to Ivy League universities with PhDs, tons of experience. And I've worked with people who grew up in a house without running water. So, it's kind of no matter where you come from or how you got here, you're welcome here, is what I would like to say. And, don't ever let anything hold you back from what you want to do. If tech is really what you want to do and you're extremely passionate about it, just keep pushing, keep moving forward. Be humble, but be diligent. And keep at it, and have a GitHub repo and a blog. So,
Shelley.
Yeah. So I would also say that for anybody who is unemployed at the moment, I feel for you. I have lost 9 jobs in my 20 years. So what I would do is, first of all, mostly know it's not your fault. It just happens. And take the time to take care of yourself. Take the time to learn skills. You have Pluralsight free for the rest of April. So take the time for that. But once you get into the workforce again, have empathy for everybody, because most everybody right now is going through stuff, so kindness and compassion go a long way.
Okay, April, I'd love to hear your takeaway.
Yes, so I had to write down what I wanted to say, so I didn't forget. So first, I would say, don't let someone else's path determine how fast or slow you should be moving. It is very easy to see how what might look quickly people are moving in their careers if you spend time all day on social media, or even worse, on LinkedIn, and you're seeing all the different title changes that your peers are making. Don't let that get to you, because everyone's on their own path. And for some, it might happen quickly. For others, it might take a bit more time. That's not to say one is better than the other. Do what's right for you. And in addition to that, as you are learning, take your time. You don't have to rush and try to learn everything about a language in 1 week, because you'll be learning for really the rest of your life, regardless of the language that you decide you want to pursue. And that even goes beyond if you're learning different programming languages as well. And in addition to that, for those who are on their job search right now, it can take time, and sometimes it is a numbers game. Whereas you might find that you're applying to a lot of jobs. Before I came to California, I applied to 20 different jobs and only one of them got back to me. So, and I happened to have gotten that one job. But it's just to say that when you are transitioning careers, things do take time, and do understand that. And for a lot of people that you might look up to and admire that are in the tech world, just remember they weren't born where they are now. It took them some time to get to where they are. And one last bit, for those who are interested in creating content, best advice I can give is just do it. Just start. Don't wait for someone else to give you that opportunity to do it. Just go ahead and start creating and put your stuff out into the world.
Thank you for listening to All Hands on Tech. If you're interested in watching the full video AMA which led to this episode, or in participating in Free April, there's a link to both in the show notes. Thank you, and have a great week.